If this foamy sponge isn't in your mouth, if you're not touching it with your tongue, you're too far.
One mustache distance. What's up, everybody? I'm Mitch. This is the Fit4Moto Academy podcast where we talk about all things moto to make you a safer, faster, stronger rider. And we just happen to love talking about motocross in general, so that's what this is all about. I am joined today by my co-host, Rick. How you doing, Rick?
Fantastic. How are you, Mitchie?
Awesome, buddy. So good to have you on. This is episode 2, which is titled, What is the Best Way to Learn a New Track? And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, yeah?
I think so.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to get into. So let's just jump right into it. What is the best way to learn a new track? Okay, man, here we are. So I think first things first, first of all, it's Father's Day. So happy Father's Day.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks. So we're just 1 week off of what was the Canadian Pro Nationals in Drumheller at Dorva, yeah?
Yeah.
What did you think of that? Now, you've never been to a Canadian National, right?
That was my first time, and I loved it. I thought it was a blast.
What did you notice differently about that event versus, if you just see some other dudes riding around, like from your standpoint, what was different?
On Sunday, the caliber of riding was next level. Like I said, I've never been to anything like that. So seeing people that fast, that good, that consistent just blew my mind. It was awesome.
Yeah. And that's something because there was the amateur day Saturday, right? And then they roll into the pros on Sunday, which I know they do a lot of different events, and so that's one thing is you get to kind of compare them back to back, right? So you get to see the speed of one group compared to that next level.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like the amateurs were quick too. Like there were some really, really good riders, but taking it to the next level with those pros was something else to see.
Yeah, and it's pretty neat too, because like where we had our setup, we were there for the whole weekend. And where we had our setup was kind of on this top of this hill, and we could only see one section of the track, and the rest was kind of blocked for lay of the land, like, stands and hills and whatever. But where we had our setup was interesting because we could kind of see them coming up this back straightaway, kind of this 90 degree, or no, it was a 180.
180, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much a 180 anyway. 180 degree corner and then back down and gone. But what's something that you noticed about that 180 degree corner from the amateurs to the pros? Because you did mention this to me.
The speed at which they hit that corner was just outstanding. How fast they were with that, and how consistently they were able to do that.
Right. And so you mean like how fast they were coming out of the corner or going in, or
all of it? Like they came in fast, they held their speed in the corner, and then they just opened her up on the way out.
Yeah, absolutely. So their entry speed. Their entry speed, their roll speed through the corner, crazy, right? Comparing that to amateurs.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Pretty cool though. There was a couple big crashes there. There was the one fella that went down after there was like a whoop section. He went down, broke his back, which is brutal. I mean,
it's terrible.
I think that's probably every rider's worst nightmare is breaking their back or breaking their neck, right? I mean, you can break a leg and an arm, and I think for the most part we accept that as part of the job, I guess, right? But man, I tell you, the back and the neck, that's scary shit to me.
It's life altering right there.
Yeah, it really is. Like, not only are your hopes and dreams of dirt biking anymore probably gone, right? Maybe not, depending on the injury, right? I'm not a doctor, but I would say for the guys that have that happen and get paralyzed, like, dude, screw biking. Now you're fighting for your life and to walk again, right? And I think having that in context, that would change a lot for me personally.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do we have an update on the guy?
I haven't. I've kind of been checking his social media. I haven't seen anything as far as an update goes. Just last I saw was that yeah, he was numb from the chest down. So that's one big accident that happened there. One of the other ones that I saw, I didn't know this till today. But I was talking to one of the people on the board at the track today, and I guess Jess Pettis, who's a super fast Canadian dude, I guess he broke his elbow there.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and I didn't know that happened, but I don't even know where it happened on the track. But apparently he broke his elbow, so that's interesting too. Just because he's one of like the main contenders in the whole series, so he got taken out. And I heard that some of the racers at the track, so that roller section where that guy ate shit and broke his back. Remember how I was telling you about that section and I said it's easy to go fast, but if you screw it up, you're really going to screw it up.
You've got some consequences coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what happened. And we did see a lot of the dudes get squirrely through there because you can open it up and kind of blitz them down into this valley. But then if you get a little bit of timing off or something, that's what's going to happen. And so I kind of heard through the grapevine that some of the riders were a little pissed off because there was a bit of a kicker going into that little gully there. There wasn't. It's one of those things, man. If you go full send into there, it's going to kick you a little funny. And I did see, from when I was watching, I did see a lot of the pro dudes get a little huckabuck through there and just about like, I mean, they're definitely not on the straight and narrow. Like they may have saved it, but it was probably a little scary. And they did that consistently, like lap after lap, which tells me that, if it was just one line, they would avoid that line, right? They're not stupid. They're pros. So if there was one bad line, they just wouldn't hit that thing anymore. Whereas I found that they were doing it lap after lap after lap, which tells me that it's the timing of that section and the speed they were going. It's just they get a little out of rhythm and it starts bucking them around.
Gotcha. So quick question for somebody who just is ill-informed. So with riders being upset with the track, is that on the designers end, or these are the best riders we have to offer? So should they just be approaching it differently and overcoming that obstacle? Or
I mean, that's kind of I think it's a two-part thing. I think on one hand, the builders have to build a safe track, but I also think that it's on the riders to also know the obstacle to a certain extent, right? I think it's 50-50 because I know that remember where we were parked up, there was like a single that launched them onto the straightaway, right? Yeah. And then right after that single, there's like a big mud hole. Remember how we saw a couple of dudes get a little squirrely through there?
Yes, sir.
So another complaint that I heard was a guy launches it off that single, lands in that mud hole, the bike comes to a complete stop and he goes flying off.
Gotcha.
And so there was some people were pissed because they're like, well, that jump is stupid. Fair enough. To be honest, I'm not a fan of that jump either. The landing on it is really hard. Like you go to flat and you are flying. So to me, it's like that's how you break your bike. You'll break spokes, you'll break stuff if you're trying to go fast.
Gotcha.
But that being said, I also do feel like it's on the rider. So there's a mud hole there. That if you launch it into there, it's probably not going to go well. So it's on you to either slow up or try and launch over it or something. You know what I mean? But everyone has to deal with that mud hole.
Yeah, you have to work the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, that's not an unsafe jump. That is a rider error for launching into a mud hole. So to me, there's a difference, right? Now some jumps, if the faces of them are made sketchy or something like that, then that's on the track builder to kind of make that a little safer. But I mean, I guess the big thing is, dude, is you're never going to make everyone happy. And in my mind, if you're pros out there, unless it's something really sketchy, I feel like you're going to have to adapt to it,
Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense.
Yeah. So on adapting to things, the National is cool, but it did bring up a question, which is, and I believe you asked me this over the weekend watching the dudes go around. They're like, so, how long do these guys get to learn the track? Because maybe they're brand new to the track. Maybe they've never been there before. Maybe they're not local. So what is the best way to learn a dirt bike track?
Yeah. Yep. That's a question that I asked you last week. And most of the time when I go riding, it's with you. So you're there to give me some tips, pointers, help me out. But when I do show up on my own, what the heck do I do?
Yeah. And I think that's a really good question because, I mean, most people have a local track that they'll hit and they'll get really comfortable at doing that one track. But then when you do venture out and you want to try a different track, that's awesome, but it can also be a little intimidating because there's some new jumps that you've never done before, or maybe they redesign your local track, right? And you've got to relearn it. And that can be another thing, I guess, that might kind of give you a little bit of a hiccup. So I think there's a couple things that you can probably do to kind of make that a little safer, because really that's probably your biggest objective, is to make it a safe way to learn the track, right? I mean, anyone can grab a handful of throttle and huck it off something, but it's probably not the best way to do it.
For sure. And how you learn the track will be different depending on whether you're there with another rider, somebody who knows the track, someone who's more experienced, or if you're just on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. So from your standpoint, as a newer rider, when you pull up to a track, what kind of things are you thinking about?
how the heck do I get around this thing?
Yeah. So, but with that, so do you, are you thinking, okay, I need to go really slow. I need to
first off, I'm going to figure out the track direction, find me a sign. And then from then on, it's just going nice and slow around the whole thing.
Yeah.
Until I start feeling somewhat comfortable, then the speed increases little by little.
Yeah. And I think that you just made a really good point, which is find the track direction. Now, I know that might seem intuitive in some places, but I also know that I've gone to tracks before where I have no idea which way this track goes, right? I'm looking around like, I don't want to pull on because I don't want to be going the wrong way. I have heard of a death from one of the local tracks here, actually, of a kid that was going the wrong way on the track, and he was on the blind side of a big jump, and he got landed on.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. So if you don't see a sign, how would you know which direction the track is going? And assuming no one's riding on it, because that's kind of a giveaway.
Okay, they're all by myself. I'd go see where the start line is and just try and follow that.
Right on. And that's a really good idea. I think another thing that people can do if they're not really sure on track direction is look at the jumps. Generally speaking, you'll see a difference between a takeoff of a jump and a landing of a jump, right? The landings are a little more beat down. They're not so peaked up, whereas a lot of the takeoffs will have a bit of a ramp to them.
Okay. Landings will be a little bit longer, smoother, more mellow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you should be able to look at an obstacle. I mean, most of them, you should be able to look at an obstacle and be like, okay, well, that's definitely the landing. So it has to be going this direction. But that's a really good point, is which way does this thing even go? I know I went to like a rocks and logs track, and I call it a track, but I'm not even convinced there is a track there as much as it is like this conglomerate of obstacles, because
they just dump a whole bunch of crap on the track and say, make your way around.
Totally. Like I couldn't figure out which direction to go on the stupid thing. And I rode around on it a bunch, and to this day, I don't know which way it goes. Like, I've seen people going this way and that way, and I'm still quite confused. So, legit, if I was to roll up to that track this evening, I would sit there and scratch my head and go, I'm going to look like an idiot because I don't know which direction this thing is going. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the kind of thing that you can go either way on, I guess. I you know what I mean? Not being a super rocks and logs hard enduro type dude, but yeah, even an experienced rider like myself will get to a place and be asking, which way is this thing going?
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's a good one. So what else? What else are you thinking? So you find the direction of the track, right? We talked about a couple ways on how you can do that. What's kind of the next thing? Once you get figured out which way you're headed, what's next?
Then that's me just putting around, going nice and slow, trying to almost memorize or understand the track, just how it flows. And then slowly I'll start picking up speed a little bit by little bit.
Yeah. So that's a really good thing. So we call those sight laps, right? Okay. So the best thing to do when you first get to a track, and you'll see newer riders do this, but you'll also see some of the best guys out there doing this. So you want to do what's, like I said, called a sight lap. So you go out and, don't jump anything. Don't even let your tires leave the ground.
So you're just rolling over.
Just literally roll the entire track. You're not trying to go out and be fast. Roll the entire track and learn what's on the backside of all these things. So a lot of times you'll think, you'll come off a jump and you're like, oh, okay, it just seems like a single or something, right? But you won't realize that on the other side is this giant mud puddle. And I mention that because that literally happened to me today. I went out to the track today, to a track that I hadn't ridden at a lot. It was the vet track out in Drumheller there. And there's a single thing, and I knew it was a single. It's like a wall jump. So I came up on it and I hammered the wall on it. And that would have been great, but there was a giant mud puddle on the other side. And I landed like on the left and the right-hand side of the track was dry. So I'd have been fine. But I came up the middle of it, right? And landed right in this super deep mud bog and just about got pitched off because I didn't roll it. So really, really important. Roll the entire track. Now, how long do you do that for? Totally depends on the rider, man. For me personally, I actually roll quite a bit because I find by the time I do a whole lap, I don't really remember what's on the other side of some of the first obstacles I went over. Like, I'm like, I don't remember. Is this a double or is it a table? I don't remember.
Yeah, with me, like I'm so concerned on what's ahead of me that I'm instantly forgetting what's behind me. So it takes quite a few till I start remembering what the jumps are.
Yeah. And I think as you get a little more experience too, you'll be more comfortable with reading something on the way up, because you can kind of look a little further ahead, and you can see, say you're coming out of a corner, and out of the corner of your eye, you're using your peripheral vision, you're like, oh, that's a table. So I can come around the corner and smoke this thing. I know I'm going to be okay. Whereas I find with the newer riders, it's, you're still kind of staring down in front of your fender. So, but that's really good. Roll it a lot and try and memorize what's on the other side of that thing before you start hucking stuff.
So we're looking out for those big mud puddles.
Yeah, absolutely. Big mud puddles. Maybe there's ruts on the downside. There could also be a kicker somewhere on the face of the jump. There could be on the landing. There could be a big hole in the landing somewhere, or a big rock. A big rock can do just as much damage as some big kicker or hole somewhere, right? So that's something else you have to be really cautious of.
Gotcha. Just going back to the kicker on the jump. So I imagine they try and make the jumps uniform the best that they can, but just through riding, that changes.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely, yeah. So, and it can be the main line on the jump where everyone's hitting it is smooth, and then a foot to the left or the right has a kicker to it, or vice versa. So understanding the takeoff of the jumps too, which is kind of leads me into the next thing. So you've done some rolling of it. You kind of have an idea of what the track is about. You're kind of getting it down. The next thing is when you start hitting some of the jumps, if that's where you're at as a rider, you can do some of the jumps. I would say, pace them a little bit, because you don't know how the face of some of these things are going to kick you. And so I can use another example today. Before that wall jump I hit, there was this double thing, and I came cooking off that thing, and the face of it kind of had a bit of a humpback in it. So what that did is it pitched my front end really low. I was expecting it to go the other way, but it pitched my front end low, and I almost endoed off of the jump because I was expecting the bike to do something differently. So, and then again, I moved a foot to the left, and the lip was fine.
Gotcha. And just to put you on the spot, how'd you correct that?
So the next lap I came around, because I actually was a little pissed off that I did that, because I'm like, oh, you idiot, what are you doing? Like, you're better than that. So literally I came around the next lap, and the next time I hit it, I hit the exact same line again, but I just put my weight a little further back, and the bike was totally flat in the air.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it pissed me off enough that I wanted to come back around and hit it again. So, but that's a good point, man. Like, you want to, not every jump face is equal, and not everyone's going to kick you the same way. So learning what some of those are like. Now, you may even have to understand and recognize what the dirt is like, because not every facility or track has the same type of dirt. Maybe it's hard packed, right? Maybe it's like solid clay. Maybe it's really gravelly stuff. Like, it can be a bunch of different types of dirt. So you have to understand how the bike is going to react in that dirt as well.
And not only the dirt, but the last time it was groomed, how it's groomed, if it's watered well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, on your couple of sight laps that you go out and do, has it been groomed? Like, is it tilled up and, you can kind of lay the power into it? Or has it not been touched in 4 years and it's like a concrete out there, right? And it's going to be super slippery. So, before you start putting the power down, that's a really safe way to do it, is to figure out how that bike's going to react off, corners on the surface, and then moving over to jumps.
Awesome. Thanks, Mitch.
So I think, so you got all that kind of stuff figured out. Now, I think probably a big thing that people are asking is, cool, how do I hit the jumps? Because that's a big one.
Oh, for sure. That's my favorite part of riding.
Right. And I think anyone who goes to the track, whether it's one of the small jumps or one of the big ones, they want to feel like they've accomplished something being there, right? So if they clear one of the little jumps, they're like, that's badass, man. I just did a double, And everyone has their own skill level that they're currently at. So maybe that's a small double, or maybe they're trying to huck the 120-foot step down or something, right? But in any case, everyone wants a win when at the track, and those wins usually come from doing a jump that you hadn't done before.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, even for me, if I hit a smaller jump on a track, or what I would think would be a smaller jump, I still feel like, yeah, nailed that one. Okay, what's the next one, right? So last year I went out to a new track, Chaos Motocross Park.
Okay, where is that?
It is up by Edmonton. I can't remember the exact town it's in, or by. It's a long ways from Calgary area. It's like 3 or 4 hours from Calgary.
Gotcha. Worth the drive?
Yeah, really cool place.
Awesome.
Really fun layout. Super fast sections. I think I hit 65 miles an hour on one stretch, and that's like coming up to a step up out of a valley that's a big jump. So some big jumps on it and some real fast sections.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But even then, as I'm going around and I'm learning the track, I do the couple roll laps and I'm like, okay, now remember this is a table or this is a little double that I can seat bounce out of a corner or something. And I'll do that. But even I get those little wins where I try one of the little jumps and I come around, I'm like, yeah, okay, what's the next one? And it can be like a 5 or 10 foot double. And I'm still like, okay, that one's check. I've done that obstacle. What's next? Right. And then I just kind of work my way up to the bigger ones, which kind of leads me to the next thing is start off small and work your way up to some of the bigger obstacles. Unless you're totally comfortable hucking the big one, which I kind of doubt.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah. So start off with some of the smaller stuff and then work your way up to some of the bigger ones. Because some of the smaller ones are easy wins. I feel like those are low-hanging fruit for riders, Like if it's a smaller table, there's not a lot of consequences if you come up short on that thing.
And that's what I was going to ask you. What are some of the safer jumps to start with, or the safer things on a track to start with?
Yeah, so tabletops for sure are some of the safer ones. Doubles, triples certainly are a little more dangerous, right? Because if you come up short, depending on how you land on that thing, it can be a negative experience for you. So tabletops, things are called camelbacks, where they just have like a really smooth, rounded landing on them. So you can come up short, you can go long, and you're going to be okay.
Gotcha.
But yeah, like a double, something like that, and some of the bigger jumps, if you OJ them, then, that can go really bad for you as well. Right. So, whereas if, I find with tabletops, you can jump up onto them and then jump a little further and you can kind of really gauge your speed on where it needs to be to get over that thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The only times, I had issues learning with tabletops is when I wouldn't quite have enough speed. I'd hit the, top of the jump and then bounce off to the downside of it.
Yeah.
And that'd get a little bit sketchy.
Yeah, totally. And it's so interesting though, right? Because you can, you're talking like a 2 or 3 foot distance difference. That's it. So from you where you're landing to clearing it nicely is like 2 or 3 feet, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's not far. But for whatever reason, psychologically, your mind is like, I don't want to hit this faster, But when you do actually hit it faster and you grease that thing, it's way easier.
Oh, absolutely. It's so much easier on me. It's easier on the bike, and I feel pretty awesome doing it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get the win, right? Yeah. So definitely start off with some of the smaller jumps. Those are wins. Things like tabletops, those are easy to do because there's less consequences. If you come up short, as long as it's not a huge tabletop, you can generally go a little long on it and you're not going to die. And then start working your way up to some of the bigger jumps.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think, talking about some of the bigger jumps, those can be really intimidating for riders, right? Especially knowing how fast to hit them, because some of those, if you do come up short or if you do go a little too fast off them, some of the bigger ones, man, they can have some consequences. So, learning how to hit those and learning how to gauge your speed off those is something I think is really important for new riders.
So if you're there by yourself, Mitchie, how do you learn that?
So for me, depending on the jump, I'll jump it a little bit and see where I land, right? And I'll jump it a little further and kind of see where I land. And then as you get more experienced as a rider, you'll just kind of intuitively know, I need to hit this thing in this gear at this speed to clear it. And so that's when you see a lot of the pros and a lot of the faster dudes. They'll come up to a jump, they'll roll it once or twice, and then they just hit it the next lap and they do it perfectly. They've just done so many jumps so many times that they can look at it and go, that's a third gear jump.
Yeah, it's just second nature for them at that point. They're
so
used to doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you're not there yet, then absolutely jump it, try and jump out a little bit, see where you land, gauge your speed, maybe grab another gear, hit it a little further, kind of work your way along the jump the best you can. Now, again, if it's a double or something like that, you're only going to be able to go so far before you start coming up really short, right? But that's one of the good things too, is that if you do try a jump and you end up coming up, pretty much casing it as hard as you possibly can, and I do that a lot, by the way, I'll try and do a jump and I'll come up just short enough where I'm like, oh, that was a hard landing. The good part is it can't get any worse than that. Like you can't come up, you can't case it harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you've already screwed up as much as you could. So
yeah, I mean, other than endoing or something like that, right? But the impact of the landing itself is not going to get worse. So, then when I come around the next lap, I'm like, okay, I know how fast I hit it that lap. I'm going to give it just a little more juice on this one, and I should sail right over it.
Gotcha. Do you have any tips for when you do case the jump? So I remember when I first started, I'd stay really soft. So I'd land and then my legs weren't locked out and my butt would smash into the seat, and it did not feel good. So just watching you and then with some more coaching, I stay a bit stiffer, and then the bike and the suspension sucks up that. Any other suggestions, or what would you recommend if you're hitting jumps but having issues with it?
Yeah, I think, you know what, and we do have to be somewhat cautious of the terminology we use. So legs locked out, no, right? But legs...
Sorry, stiff.
Right.
Yeah.
Stiff enough to take the impact. So if you think of like jumping a pedal bike that has zero suspension, your legs and your arms and stuff, that your body is the suspension, right? So applying that same thing, you don't want to be so limp and limber that you just crater into the bike, but you also don't want to be so locked out that, you know, you're assuming the suspension will do all the work, and it very well might not.
Yeah.
You know, so definitely learning to use your body as suspension too. And this is where, you know, you've probably heard me harp on your foot placement on the foot pegs. If you ride on the balls of your feet, your ankles and your calves will act as quite a bit of a suspension for you. Now that's going to hit a certain point, right? Then travel up to your quads and that kind of stuff. And that starts to take more impact. And that actually will all start to work together with the suspension on the bike so that the landing is not that bad at all.
Gotcha.
You know, but I think, you know, one tip for riders, and this can be, I mean, everyone's in a different place with riding, right? A jump that I may find to be big might be small to somebody else. And a jump that I may think is small might be somebody's big jump, right? So I think as it relates to that, if you're out there by yourself, like we talked about, kind of gauging it and that kind of stuff, I would say though, if you're out there by yourself, be super careful, because if you wad up. So again, when I was out riding today, I was pretty much by myself. And I thought about that a lot while I was riding around, right? If I have an accident, there's probably no one's going to see me, and I'm going to be laying there for a long time.
Yeah, that'd be terrible. Have you had any issues like that, Mitch? Out riding by yourself and have a crash?
No, I've been fortunate enough that whenever I have crashed, there's been people around, but I also don't ride now unless there's other people around, or if I do, it's like on a figure 8 track or something where it's like I can only hurt myself so much here, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So best practice would be go with a buddy, or make sure there's some people there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And depending on which track you're going to, hopefully there'll be at least a couple people there that can help you, right? But certainly if you're going somewhere where you think you're going to be by yourself, then maybe hucking the jumps that's not the time or place to do it.
Yeah, tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Work on corners, work on starts, work on technique. There's so many things you can work on without having to huck all the jumps to still feel like you got that win for the day, to feel like you've improved somehow.
Gotcha.
You know? But so let's say you're at the track and there are some people there, and you are eyeing up a jump that you feel is big, however big that may be. I think there's a really good way of hitting that thing that takes some of the fear out of it, I guess. And we call that getting towed in. So let's say I'm on a track and you're like, okay, there's Mitch. I see him doing that tabletop, the finish line jump, whatever it is, right? One thing that you can do is you can just have me tow you into it. So what you have to do is get behind me on the track and hit the jump the same speed that I'm going.
Gotcha.
Right? So that's being called towed into it. Now, it's not that simple. You can't just hit it the same speed I'm going and expect it to go perfectly, for a couple of reasons. If I scrub it, right, I'm probably going way faster than I need to clear it. So if you hit it the same speed and you don't scrub it, you're going to overshoot it, you're going to OJ it, and that's not good.
Gotcha.
And secondly, you have to understand how the face of that jump is going to respond when you do hit it at that speed. Because what happens is when you're hitting a jump going slowly, the suspension works a certain way. When you hit that jump going 4 times faster, the suspension is loading and unloading at a different speed, right? Which means the oil and stuff going through the valves is going at a different speed. So the suspension will react differently when you hit that jump faster. So I would just caution you, if you are getting towed into a jump from your buddy or whatever, definitely hit that jump a couple times beforehand at different speeds to see how the suspension is going to react to it. Because the last thing you want to do is, and I've seen this a lot, where you'll come up and you'll huck a jump thinking that it's all good, and you probably are at the right speed, but you're not expecting the suspension to rebound the way that it does, and then you get chucked off and you end up wadding it up.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I think that's I think those are some good ways to kind of learn a fresh track, man. I mean, I legitimately still do those today. Some of the bigger jumps, I don't really get towed into anything anymore. I'm just trying to think of some of the bigger jumps that I've hit in the last few years, and I don't know. I just end up. I end up
so good. You just
no.
Now I don't need anybody else.
No, I think I just, like I said, personally I really apply I'll jump it a little bit, see how it goes. Jump it halfway, see how it goes, and then I go, oh, okay, I've done enough of these now. I need to hit this thing in this gear, Yeah. And generally that goes pretty well for me. Like I said, I have come up and case things really badly, but then I think to myself, okay, a little bit faster and I'm golden. And it can't get worse than that, right? I can't come up any more short than that and make it hurt. So I'm good. If that's the worst it's going to be, I'm good.
Yeah. Just makes me think of when we were at Rocky Mountain House a few weeks ago, and Tyler was helping me with those 2 doubles. So what he did with me was we'd roll the jump quite a few times to the point that it kind of got annoying. And then after that, we'd come in with a ton of speed and then brake as hard as we could and stop before we went over the double. And we kept doing that, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 times each until it was time to give her. And we'd practice so many times that it just came naturally and it was easy. And then I was able to do the double corner double. And that was my first time doing doubles like that.
Yeah, and that's wicked. And those were not easy jumps either. For a newer rider, those are a couple intimidating jumps for sure. The faces on them are somewhat steep. Now, they do shoot you fairly well through the air, right? There's no crazy kickers or nothing to them, but still, for a new rider, those are intimidating jumps. So that is a really good technique that he mentioned to you. We just take a couple short runs up to the jump before you hit it, right? To kind of get used to the feeling that's coming out of that corner. So now you're not thinking about that anymore. That being said, the speed that you are bringing to the jump, you do have to know, is this too slow or is this too fast? Because what can happen is you come out of the corner, wherever the jump is, you get going towards the jump, right? And you're like, okay, that part of your brain that says go faster or go slower goes into autopilot because now you're scared shitless because you're about to hit the jump, right? So if your autopilot is not set at the right speed for that jump, that's not good either, right?
Totally, and that's not something I would have been able to accomplish on my own. Like, I needed that more experienced rider to show me that speed and help me build my confidence rolling up to that jump.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's not something I just do on my own.
Yeah. And that's a good way, if you can have someone a little more experienced, kind of, and even watching them. You can watch someone to see how much speed they're carrying into a jump, right? And kind of gauge off of that. I've done that myself. There's actually just recently there's a section where there's like this double thing into a roller section, and I was kind of eyeballing it like, I think I could actually double into that. And I'm thinking about hitting it, and then I watched another pro go and huck it off, and I'm like, oh, he's not going that fast at all. So I went around the next lap and hucked it, just because I can look at the speed he's going and go, oh, okay. I don't need to be fourth tapped to try and gap this thing. This is not that bad at all. And so that's exactly what I did. So yeah, absolutely. Watching other people is another huge learning curve too. So if you watch some of the faster dudes, again, keeping in mind that they're going to scrub and they're going to have all kinds of corner speed and stuff, but watching how they're hitting jumps and understanding how high they're going, the trajectory of their bike, is it, you know what I mean? Like, does it look like it has a really hard face to it and it's kicking them a whole bunch, or is it somewhat smooth? I think, as a newer rider, those are all things that you can apply to make it a little bit safer when you're out learning that new track.
Excellent. Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah, buddy. So, what else? Is there anything else you can think of when it comes to a new track?
So we pretty much just touched on jumps. What about like whoop sections, that kind of stuff? Because it seems like, as we talked about, there's lots of injuries there. And as you recall, we went riding with my wife years ago, and she was getting a little spicy and ended up breaking her ankle in 6 places. So,
she got a little
cast for 6 months.
A little spicy in the whoops.
Yeah. So how do you avoid that?
Man, I think whoops are something that you need a certain amount of skill to get through safely. And unfortunately, they're not intimidating as much because they're small, right?
Totally. I see them. I look at them. I'm like, oh, those are just little. I got this.
Yeah.
And then I don't.
Right. They like lull you into this false sense of security. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely.
But the problem with whoops is, in the same way that we just saw at the Pro National and Drum, you can go through them fast, but there is bad consequences when you start getting bent out of shape, right? Which is exactly what happened. So, I think the whoops there's something that you really have to learn how to ride through, because your weight and your body positioning and on the bike and all that stuff, like we could do hours and hours and hours on just how to hit whoops as far as technique goes through them. But I think if you're first coming to a track and they have a set of whoops, I mean, first of all, it seems like all whoops are different. I mean, even if you watch like a supercross race, it seems like every single round of all 17 rounds, the whoops are different. They're different sizes. They're different, distance apart. And even the riders talk about that. They're like, oh, they're monsters this weekend, right? They're really going to be separating the top guys from, the lower, whatever. And then there'll be the opposite. We're like, oh, they're a joke this weekend. So the track is going to be one speed. Everyone's going to be within like a tenth of a second of each other. And that's exactly what happens. So I feel like, depending on where you go, the whoops can vary so much from, are they like a short choppy whoop section, or are they more like a longer roller whoop section? I think if you're trying to gauge the speed on them, first and foremost, keep your weight back, right? The last thing you want to do is have your front end tuck in, and that's when things start going sideways. Definitely control the back end, because I think what happened with your wife is that her the back end started bucking around on her a little bit, and it pitched her off, if I remember correcely.
Yep.
Yeah.
We could watch a GoPro.
That's
I'm
right.
sure she'd love that. We could post it.
Yeah. So, that's the thing with whoops, is that the bike can really, really easily get out of control on you. So I would say just be cautious going into them, and, maybe try and double into them, triple, that kind of thing. Like jump your way through them first. And then once you get comfortable jumping through them, then you can start to put the gas on and start to kind of blitz them a little easier. And as you carry more and more speed into that section, you'll get more and more comfortable with opening up the throttle on them,
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a really good question. I feel like, maybe it's just around here, but I feel like the whoop sections are kind of a dying thing.
I was going to ask, when you're talking about that, is that something that riders love? Like, are there guys out there like, yeah, I can't wait to hit some whoops. Like, this is awesome.
No one likes whoops.
So why are they there? Is it just to slow people down, test their skills?
Both, but I also think
designers are jerks. I don't know.
I think they yeah, it's going to test your skills. It's going to slow some people down, and I think they're a challenging obstacle, right? So I think, when if you're making a track, or even as a rider, you need somewhat of a balance between it's too easy and this is dangerous now, right? So, for example, the one track at Drumheller there's the I call it the beginner track, right? I could burn 3 tanks of gas on that track, and my heart rate still won't even barely be up, right? It's just not challenging enough for me. Whereas for newer riders, it's fantastic, right? That's
where I hang out most of the time.
Well, there's lots of good mellow jumps on there that's not going to go too sideways for you, right? There's no whoop section on it. All of this stuff is really, really safe. The corners are gradual, but you can get tight if you want to. Like, it's just a fantastic place to learn how to ride a dirt bike.
Yeah, I love that track. That was just awesome. Like, there's not a whole lot in terms of consequences if you do screw up, because it is so mellow and pretty laid back.
Yeah, and that's fantastic, right? Whereas for me, again, I'll ride around on it anytime I get to ride my dirt bike. Is fun, but it's not the same as if I'm out on a pro track somewhere and I'm getting into deep rutted corners, or I'm hucking tables or whatever, right? So I forget where I was going with that. What were we talking about? I got sidetracked thinking about this other beginner track here.
Yeah, the difference between tracks being too hard.
Right. Yeah, that's what it was. Thank you. Yeah, that's what it was. There has to be that happy medium. So for me, a track like that's a little too easy, right? But there's also jumps and stuff that are sketchy, and whoop sections, depending on how they're built, can border into that sketchy moment, because, like you said, a lot of people do crash on those. Now, it's a lot of the beginner or newer riders, junior, that kind of thing, will crash on them because they don't have the experience level yet to understand how to get through them safely. So they just kind of open up the throttle and hope for the best, right? And that's when the back end starts doing funky things, or maybe you let the front end dip, and next thing you know, you're going over the handlebars. So personally, I don't like whoops. I think they're a really dangerous obstacle. I don't like seeing them on any track. I mean, a professional supercross track is one thing.
It is pretty cool to watch the pros rip through those.
Yeah, absolutely. It's cool to watch skilled riders get through them.
It's not fun to do
Yeah,
yourself.
but they're, I don't know. For me, I just think that they're challenging, but it might be a little too challenging for the type of rider that's going to be riding on it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that is something that I hear a lot about from riders locally, is they'll see me hit a roller section and, you know, they'll ask, how are you getting through that so fast, right? But that's just learning how the bike will behave going through that at that speed, you know? Because I could put them on the same bike, tell them I'm in this gear at this throttle, and hold on, and you'll be okay. And they're gonna wad it up, right? Because the bike is gonna dance around, and it's going to react differently than what they've ever experienced before.
Gotcha.
You know, so they're just not used to having those like micro corrections to kind of get it leveled out. You know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it, dude. Like, we talked about some jumping. We talked about doing some rolling, you know, around the track, making sure you understand what it's all about, the dirt conditions, you know, because it can be a really intimidating thing getting to a new track. And it feels like, you know, you get there. So for me personally, I was at Glen Helen and never ridden there before, right? Jumps, well, I mean, this was just on a normal practice day, so they didn't have the huge, crazy national jumps. But the jumps were all super safe. They weren't very big. And I was riding like a beginner out there. I was super nervous. One, because of all the guys around me. I'm like, holy shit, this is Glen Helen, right? And two, because it was a new surface to me. So I wasn't used to the super sharp edges underneath the soft dirt at Glen Helen. I wasn't used to how the bike was reacting. So it did take me a little while. It took me a good couple hours to figure out how to ride that track, at least somewhat to my normal speed on a dirt bike, you know? So I do understand where people are coming from when they're like, dude, I show up to a new track. How do I ride this thing? It's frustrating because, you know, it's your local track. You're way faster and you're way more confident. And then you get to this new place and you may leave there thinking, I don't know what the hell I'm doing on a dirt bike. You know, but I think if you apply some of those things we talked about, that'll help you out quite a bit to learn a new track and to do it safely, importantly, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I'm most concerned about, doing it safely right now. Like, I want to get faster, of course, but you know, if I'm hurt, I'm not riding. So
yeah, absolutely. And you know, I mean, we're not getting any younger, so it takes a little longer to heal from things, you know, than it used to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that's it, man. I think that's those are some good ways to learn how to ride a new track on episode 2. Thanks for joining me, dude.
Thanks, Mitchie.
What are we gonna have for the next couple? You got any ideas?
I don't know, but my leg's asleep and all tingly right now. So it's hard to think about anything other than my leg.
Right on, buddy. Okay, well, thanks so much, everybody, for listening to the Fit4Moto Academy podcast. Check out www.fit4moto.com. For all of the merch we've got, right? We got videos, how-to videos. We got lots of cool stuff. We got a members-only area where you can have access to some behind-the-scenes content. I mean, we're really trying to level this whole thing up and create a space for everyone to enjoy.
Yeah, awesome.
You know what I mean?
Yep. And if you like whoops, flood Mitch's DM. Send DMs.
Slide into my DMs.
Slide in there. Yeah.
Right on, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening to episode 2 of the Fit4Moto Academy podcast. I'm Mitch. This is
Rick.
And
thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. We'll talk to you guys again.
See you soon. Dude, my leg. Normally punch it to make it go away, but
it's not like blood clot or something, is it?
I hope not.
Just casually doing a podcast, you're getting a blood clot, no big deal.
Oh, don't worry, I've texted 911. They're
yeah,
on the way.
I have to push through this. We need to finish this podcast.
I know my priorities.
The ambulance shows up. We're like, give us 5 minutes.
Actually, we've got a special guest, two medics. Welcome to the podcast.
What are your thoughts on injuries? Put him on the spot.
Yeah,
hand him a little mic. Right on, buddy.